Taurus, you may not even realize it, but something in you has already ended. Not with noise or applause, not with fire or farewell, but with stillness, with space, with a quiet breath between chapters that most people wouldn't even notice. What's closing now isn't just a situation or a habit or a season, it's a version of you that carried the weight for too long, that smiled when it hurt, that tried to hold it all together while shrinking quietly at the edges. That version is no longer here. And you, the one reading these words now, are not broken or behind. You are brand new. Not in appearance, not in style, but in essence. And that essence is no longer willing to live by patterns that weren't yours to begin with. This isn't a transformation born out of desire. It's one born out of necessity, out of the refusal to keep surviving on half-light, out of the exhaustion that came from making yourself small so others could feel comfortable. You didn't choose to change because it looked beautiful. You chose to change because staying the same was killing your spirit. And so, piece by piece, you began letting go of the mindset that told you loyalty meant self-abandonment, of the roles you played just to avoid disappointing anyone, of the quiet fears that whispered you'd be alone if you ever showed up in your fullness. And as you released each layer, something sacred began to emerge underneath, not perfection, not certainty, but presence. This is the kind of rebirth people don't understand until they go through it themselves. It doesn't come with a clean cut or a pretty bow. It comes with confusion, with grief, with long days of silence where you question everything, even your own reflection. It comes with walking away from what felt safe, not because it harmed you, but because it no longer honors who you're becoming. It comes with setting boundaries that make your voice tremble, and still choosing to speak. It comes with realizing that some of the things you once fought to keep were the very things keeping you from yourself. Taurus, what you've just done, what you are doing, is nothing short of alchemical. You've buried a version of yourself that learned how to navigate life through self-sacrifice, that mistook over-functioning for love, that confused predictability with peace, and in its place, you are standing barefoot on new ground, not sure what comes next, not trying to rush forward, just breathing, just listening, just being. And that is more than enough, because this time, you're not building a life to impress anyone. You're building a life that feels like home in your own bones. There's healing happening here, but not the kind that's loud or fast. It's quiet, slow, almost invisible. You might find yourself needing more rest, more space, fewer words. You might feel tired even after a full night's sleep. You might cry without warning or get chills when nothing around you has changed. That's not regression. That's your nervous system catching up to your spirit's truth. That's your body finally feeling safe enough to release what it was forced to carry. That's your soul asking for integration, not another lesson, but time to absorb what you've already survived. You've stepped out of something ancestral, something old, passed down, conditioned into you so early that it felt like identity. Maybe it was the need to prove your worth through stability. Maybe it was the belief that love had to be earned through endurance. Maybe it was the idea that being needed was more important than being known. Whatever it was heavy. And now, you're no longer carrying it. Not because it didn't matter, but because it doesn't belong to the future you're walking toward. The curse has been broken. Not a magical curse, but an emotional one, a pattern that had you choosing safety over sovereignty, silence over truth, compromise over connection. And now, the space that's opening up inside you might feel unfamiliar. You may not know what to do with it. You may be tempted to fill it with something, anything, just to avoid the discomfort of not knowing. But Taurus, let that space breathe. Let it stretch. Let it speak. You don't need to rush to rebuild. You don't need to fill the void with distractions. That emptiness is not lack, it's potential. It's clarity. It's the place where real alignment is born. And what wants to grow from here cannot grow on top of what you've just buried. It needs soil. It needs stillness. It needs you. What's coming next for you isn't a reward, it's a reflection. It's the mirror image of the internal shift you've made. The people, opportunities, and experiences that begin to show up will feel different. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. Your standards are higher now, not out of ego, but out of respect for your own energy. Your presence is softer now, not because you're weaker, but because you're no longer trying to defend yourself from every angle. You're not auditioning for love anymore. You're not chasing after peace that costs your sanity. You're simply allowing what's true to find you and trusting that you'll know the difference this time. And if old temptations resurface, if familiar patterns try to sneak back in, wearing new faces or making new promises, don't be surprised. That's part of the test. Not to shame you, not to punish you, but to give you a chance to choose again, to stand at the threshold of the past and say, I remember who I was, and I know who I am now. And with that knowing, you'll walk forward not because the path is clear, but because you're no longer willing to walk in circles. Taurus. This chapter is not about doing more. It's about becoming more honest. It's about aligning your outer life with your inner truth. It's about protecting your peace like it's sacred because it is. It's about honoring the version of you that stayed too long, that loved too hard, that worked too much, that never asked for help, and letting them rest. You don't need to carry them anymore. You don't need to explain this to anyone. You don't need to rush the becoming. You just need to keep showing up slowly, bravely, consistently for yourself. You've already buried the old version. The curse has already been broken. And now, the real story begins. And maybe what's most powerful in this season of your becoming isn't just what you've outgrown, Taurus, but what you've chosen to forgive not in others, but in yourself. Because it's one thing to let go of the weight of other people's expectations, their judgments, their mistakes, their silence when they should have stood up for you, or their noise when you needed peace. But it's another thing entirely to lay down the internal accusations, the replayed moments of why did I do that? Why did I stay? How could I not see? And allow yourself to finally understand that you were never operating from brokenness, but from a set of tools that were built in survival, in protection, in the deep and quiet need to be loved, in whatever way love was available at the time. And now that you know more, you can choose differently. But that doesn't make the past version of you wrong, it just makes them human. And this is where the real softness returns. Not as weakness, but as wisdom. Because when you begin to truly forgive the parts of yourself that didn't know better, when you look at your younger self, the one who tolerated too much, who asked for too little, who bent and folded and twisted into shapes that no longer exist in your current body, and you don't flinch, don't judge, don't pull away, but instead say, you were doing the best you could with what you had. Something inside you exhales. Something unfreezes. Something that's been waiting a long time to be seen with compassion instead of criticism begins to bloom again. And it doesn't need fixing. It just needed love. Because, Taurus, your journey has never been about being perfect, about getting it right every time, about building an image of stability so solid that nothing could shake it. Your journey has always been about returning to your truth. Even if it meant tearing down the false walls you built for protection, even if it meant sitting in the rubble of what once felt certain, even if it meant looking yourself in the mirror and seeing not a project, not a problem, but a person deserving, evolving, sacred. You were not wrong for wanting connection. Even when you settled for crumbs, you were not foolish for hoping someone would finally choose you. Even when you knew they were never really available, You were not naive for believing that loyalty would be enough to keep something alive that was already fading, and you were not weak for needing comfort, for choosing temporary peace over immediate confrontation, for staying longer than you should have because you didn't know how to leave without losing a part of yourself you hadn't yet fully claimed. That was not failure. That was your nervous system doing its job. That was your heart trying to navigate terrain it had never seen before. That was love in its most unrefined, earnest form, and it deserved grace, not punishment. And if no one has ever told you this before, let me say it now. The choices you made in the past were not made with the clarity you have today. They were made from the intersection of pain and longing, of wounds and wishes, of dreams that didn't yet know where to land. And while some of those choices may have brought consequences you're still unraveling, they also brought you here to this place of awareness, of truth, of reckoning. And that means they weren't meaningless. They were the pathway. They were the training. They were the stories that carved space for your real self to emerge. Now you are no longer just surviving your past. You are integrating it. You are rewriting the narrative not by pretending it didn't happen, but by seeing it with gentler eyes. You are releasing the shame not by erasing the events, but by refusing to see yourself as the villain in your own story. You are learning that strength doesn't mean coldness, that forgiveness doesn't mean denial, that love doesn't mean suffering. You are rebuilding a relationship with yourself that is rooted not in demands, but in devotion, and that, Taurus, is the foundation that will never crack beneath you again. You've already shed the belief that everything is your fault. You're beginning to understand the difference between responsibility and blame. Responsibility means responding to life with the tools you now possess, not punishing yourself for the tools you lacked. Blame is a loop. Responsibility is a ladder. And every time you respond to your old pain with compassion instead of contempt, you take another step up. Every time you hold space for your old decisions without ripping yourself apart, you gain ground in your own heart. Every time you say, I didn't know, but I know now, you bring light to a place that used to live in shadows. This isn't self-help. This is self-remembrance. You're not trying to become someone new. You're peeling away the roles you never wanted to play. You're releasing the voices that never belonged to you. You're taking off the armor you wore because you thought it was the only way to be safe. And now that you're standing here, exposed, rough, real, you are learning that your vulnerability is not your liability. It is your access point to everything true. And yes, there may still be moments where the past echoes loudly, where the old triggers fire off, where you wonder if you've really healed or if you're just pretending. That's normal. Healing is not a straight line. It's a spiral. You will revisit the same lessons with new eyes, deeper breath, wider love. But each time, you'll feel a little less tangled, a little more rooted, a little more steady in your knowing, because the old version of you would have collapsed under the weight of this truth. The new version of you is breathing through it. The old version of you would have apologized for needing space. The new version of you honors silence as sacred. The old version of you would have twisted yourself into 1,000 shapes to be chosen. The new version of you knows that being chosen means nothing if you're not being true. So keep going. Taurus, even when it's quiet, even when it's lonely, even when the work is invisible and the reward is simply peace, you are no longer chasing outcomes. You are embodying wholeness. You are no longer searching for someone to tell you who you are. You are becoming the one who knows. You are no longer shrinking to fit into stories that require your silence. You are speaking your name with clarity. You are showing up to your own life without apology. And as you walk this path, remember the old you isn't something to bury in shame. They are something to bless. Because without their courage, you wouldn't be here. Without their choices, their heartbreaks, their missteps, their longing, you wouldn't have the clarity to choose differently now. So thank them, Honor them, lay them to rest with love, and then rise. Rise not in rebellion, but in reverence. Rise not to prove anything, but because it's your time. Rise slowly, rise gently, rise honestly, but rise because you're ready now. And you don't need permission to begin again. And while your heart and mind have been moving through layers of forgiveness and transformation, your body has not been left behind. It, too, has been carrying the weight of what you've lived through, storing every unspoken thought, every suppressed emotion, every time you told yourself it wasn't the right time to fall apart. And now that you've begun to truly let go of the old stories, the false identities, the outdated loyalties, your body is finally responding, not with sudden energy or lightness, but with deep, aching fatigue, the kind that doesn't always make sense to your logical mind, but speaks volumes to your spirit, which has been fighting quietly for years just to make it here. There's a reason you feel tired in a way that no amount of sleep seems to solve. A reason why some mornings your bones feel heavier, your lung slower, your breath just a little harder to deepen. Your system is recalibrating itself after years of overfunctioning in survival mode. And though the outside world may expect you to bounce back quickly, to snap into productivity, to make the most of your clarity, your body knows that healing isn't about speed. It's about integration. And that kind of integration takes space, stillness, and a level of self-trust you're only just beginning to build. And maybe you've noticed other things too: the shedding of hair, the sensitive skin, the unpredictable appetite, the way you can no longer tolerate certain environments, certain conversations, even certain fabrics against your skin. None of this is random, Taurus, and none of it is weakness. It's your body speaking the language of release, the language of detox, the language of "we're done holding this now." And while part of you may be tempted to label it as a problem, as something to fix, to hide, to control, what if instead you saw it as proof of your inner work finally reaching your outer shell? As confirmation that even the deepest layers of you are now being rewritten in truth. You've stepped into what some would call the Four of Swords phase of the journey, not the high of awakening, not the clarity of breakthrough, but the pause that comes after collapse and before rebirth, the holy in-between, where your only job is to be to rest, to recover, not just from what hurt you, but from what it took to keep going when you had no space to grieve, no permission to fall apart, and no idea what would be left of you when it was over. And now that you've made it through the fire, your body needs the cool of the shade, the quiet of the cave, the softness of a life that doesn't require you to earn your right to exist. This is not laziness. This is sacred restoration. This is where your nervous system learns what safety feels like again. This is where your muscles begin to unclench after years of holding armor in your shoulders. This is where your digestion slows, not out of dysfunction, but because your body is no longer in flight mode. This is where your emotions rise unexpectedly, not because something is wrong, but because for the first time in a long time, your inner world is no longer being drowned out by noise. And it's okay if this makes you uncomfortable. It's okay if the slowness feels foreign, if the emptiness triggers restlessness. If you catch yourself trying to make this phase productive, you've spent so much of your life tying your worth to what you can do, who you can help, what you can offer, how quickly you can recover, that allowing yourself to simply be a body in need of healing may feel like failure. But I promise you, Taurus, it's not. It's grace. It's courage. It's the kind of strength that doesn't get celebrated on the outside, but completely rewires you on the inside. You are not just recovering from a difficult season. You are recovering from the years you spent pushing through exhaustion because you were afraid of what would happen if you slowed down. You are recovering from the stories that taught you that rest was indulgent, that pausing was dangerous, that being soft meant being vulnerable. And now, in this stillness, you're learning that slowness isn't stagnation, it's wisdom. You're learning that not every season is about expansion. Some are about remembering, some are about undoing, some are about returning home to a self you never had the time or space to meet. So let your healing look strange. Let it look quiet. Let it look like naps in the middle of the day. Like long showers where the water carries away the grief your words still can't hold. Like standing barefoot on the earth just to feel steady again. Like saying no to invitations because your soul said yes to silence. Like crying over things you thought you were over. Like canceling plans because your body said not today. Like not knowing what you want next because you're still grieving what you just let go. There's no timeline for this. There's no milestone to reach. No one is coming to grade you on how well you recover. The reward is the recovery itself, the way you begin to trust your own rhythms again. The way you learn to notice when something feels like a no in your body, to the way you catch yourself, choosing peace over performance, the way your breath deepens in moments that used to trigger you, the way your self-talk softens when you stumble, the way you stop apologizing for needing what you need. And yes, there will still be moments of doubt, moments where you wonder if you're just being dramatic, if you should be doing more by now, if this exhaustion means something is wrong. But I want you to remember that healing often looks like a mess before it becomes a masterpiece. And what feels like nothing happening is actually your entire being restructuring itself around a new truth that you are allowed to exist without constantly proving that you deserve to. You are not broken because you're tired. You're tired because you've been breaking cycles. You're tired because you're no longer pretending to be okay. You're tired because you're finally safe enough to feel everything that had to be put on hold just to survive. And now, all that suppressed energy is rising. Not to drown you, but to be released, to be seen, to be felt, so it can finally leave. This is where the roots grow deeper. This is where the soil settles after the storm. This is where you gather strength, not from doing, but from being. And though it may not look impressive to anyone else, your inner world knows the truth. You are healing. You are recalibrating. You are reclaiming what was never lost, only buried. So let the others move fast. Let the world keep spinning. Let the calendar stay full for those who still think speed is power. You, Taurus, are learning a different way, a slower way, a truer way, a way that honors your body as a sacred vessel. It is not a machine to be optimized, but a home to be lived in, gently, consciously, fully. There will come a time when the energy returns, when the clarity sharpens, when the spark reignites. But you don't need to force that time. You don't need to chase it. It will come when you're ready. And until then, your only job is to rest like you believe you're worth saving. Because you are, and you always have been. And now that you've begun to reclaim your time, your energy, your boundaries, don't be surprised when the past comes knocking, not in obvious ways, but in subtleties, in soft echoes, in familiar smiles, dressed in new language. Because that's how the universe tests alignment. Not with fireworks, but with patterns in disguise, patterns that used to feel like safety or chemistry or fate. And yet now, somehow, they ring a little hollow, because what used to tempt you no longer touches the same part of you. And what used to feel magnetic now only hums with discomfort, and that is not failure. That is evidence of change. It may show up in the form of an opportunity you once would have jumped at an invitation, a message, a glance, a promise that sounds eerily close to the one you fell for before, but this time, instead of excitement, you feel hesitation, not because you're afraid, but because you're aware, because something in you recognizes the fine print your old self ignored, because your body, more attuned than ever, doesn't light up with yes, it withdraws. It tenses. It whispers, this isn't for us anymore. And that, Taurus, is the test. Not whether it looks tempting, but whether you're still willing to betray yourself just to feel chosen by something you've already outgrown, and you're not anymore. Because this version of you no longer bargains with red flags. This version doesn't mistake intensity for intimacy. This version doesn't ask for less just to keep someone around. This version sees the game for what it is and doesn't play it. And that's not because you're jaded, it's because you're healed. You've buried the part of you that reached for comfort in chaos. You've broken the agreement that said you had to be small to be loved. You've walked through the fire of disappointment and come out the other side knowing that love, respect, and peace are not things you earn through pain, but things you receive by staying true to yourself, even when it's lonely, even when it's slow. But what makes it harder now is that some of the tests won't come from strangers or surface-level flings. Some of them will come from people you once opened your soul to, people who meant something, people you imagined staying. And when their name crosses your screen or their energy lingers in your dreams, it won't be easy to tell whether it's a sign or a trap. Because part of you may still care, part of you may still ache, part of you may still want to believe that maybe this time it's different. And in one case, Taurus, it just might be. But not because the connection has magically healed itself in your absence, not because time alone can rewrite patterns that were never addressed, not because they suddenly woke up and saw everything clearly, but because they've been unraveling, too, quietly, privately, away from you. There is someone who once stood very close to your heart, someone whose energy doesn't leave easily, someone you perhaps had to let go of not because the love was fake, but because it was incomplete, immature, distorted by fear or silence or avoidance, and now they are sitting in the wreckage of their own emotional storm, trying to understand what it was that slipped through their fingers when you walked away, and realizing, slowly and painfully, that it wasn't just you they lost, it was the version of themselves they had access to when they were near you. This isn't a fairy tale moment. This isn't the grand return. This isn't a neatly wrapped reconciliation. This is real, messy, complicated. A person unraveling under the weight of their own unhealed patterns, a soul quietly waking up to their part in the disconnection, a heart still unsure how to speak, how to show up, how to ask for another chance without sounding like the same old story told with new vocabulary. And you, Taurus, you can feel it. Even if they haven't said a word, even if you haven't heard from them in weeks or months, you feel the shift, the pull, the sudden presence in your energy field that wasn't there before. Not a demand, but a question, not a pressure, but a presence. They're thinking of you. And not just in passing, they're remembering, not the version of you they projected onto, but the real one. The one who loved them even when it was hard. The one who offered grace long after it was deserved. The one who walked away not to punish, but to protect both of you from another round of the same pain. But what you need to know now, Taurus, is that just because someone is hurting doesn't mean it's your job to heal them. Just because someone remembers you doesn't mean they're ready to meet you. Just because a soul is tethered to yours doesn't mean you're meant to hold hands again. This isn't a call to rescue. This isn't a signal to circle back. This is a test of clarity. Will you reach back towards someone who still hasn't learned how to stay? Will you soften your boundary because their sadness looks like sincerity? Will you confuse their longing for readiness? Because if they haven't done the work and only you can feel the truth of that, then they're reaching out, no matter how tender, is not about building something new, but about soothing their guilt. And you didn't come this far. You didn't dig this deep. You didn't reclaim this much of yourself, just to fall back into a version of love that still asks you to abandon parts of your truth. Let your heart be open. Yes, let it be compassionate, but let your feet stay grounded in everything you've learned. Let your standards stay intact. Let your intuition be louder than your nostalgia. Let your body tell you what your mind wants to romanticize. And if the connection has truly changed, if they have truly changed, you won't need to guess. Their actions will show it. Their energy will feel different. The conversation will be mutual, not begging. The tone will be ownership, not defensiveness. The pace will be steady, not anxious. And even then, you still get to choose. You are not obligated to re-enter any dynamic just because the door is open. You can bless their process without becoming part of it. You can acknowledge their growth without inviting them back into your sacred space. You can honor the love without reliving the lesson. And if nothing else, let this be your sign you've reached the level where your tests look like closure, dressed as curiosity. Like apologies without real action. Like connections that only want you back, now that you've stopped needing them. You've reached the level where your light pulls people in, but your discernment keeps you safe. Because you're no longer starving for emotional crumbs. You're not looking for validation in temporary affection. You're not trying to fix someone so they'll finally love you right. You're standing in your worth. Quietly, powerfully, peacefully. And that's what makes you untouchable now, not because you're closed, but because you're clear,